On today's show, Anthony Davis's monster night and game winner keep the Mavs play-in hopes alive. The Knicks remain winless against the NBA's best teams. The Heat with a big win against Boston, and the Rockets clinch a playoff spot for the first time in 5 years. It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And joining me is my partner in crime, the host of Locked On Heat, David Ramil. David, what'd you see in the NBA last night?
Buzzer beaters, blowouts, upsets, and everything in between. I saw a little bit of everything, so let's get to it.
We've got a 9-game slate to get into on today's show. First, we want to thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And the first place we are going for today's show is out in Dallas, where the Mavericks keeping their play-in hopes alive behind a monster game from Anthony Davis. Let's check in with Locked On Mavs for more.
Anthony Marshawn Davis, an incredible game from him. You just couldn't ask for more from the Brow himself. I called him out after last game. He only scored 12 points against the Nets. Mavs lost to the Nets. They were favored in that game. They should have won that game. And he came out in this one and gave you everything you could have ever wanted, including the game winner at the end, a great drive against Okongwu with 34 points, 15 boards. He had 5 blocks in this game as well. He even left the game in the second quarter. At the end of the first quarter, he got hit in the face by Daniel Gafford. He was cut over the eye, and he had to leave. He went to the locker room. He got stitches or whatever, had a bandage on it, and then he was out for the entire second quarter until the last 2 minutes. So he came back, and he only played 30 minutes in this game. Anthony Davis is absolutely incredible. You couldn't have asked for more from him, and he's leading the Mavericks going forward. The Mavs will go how Anthony Davis goes, and they went in a really good way in this one. They also had a couple of strategic things I thought were interesting. They pressed a ton in the third quarter. It really kickstarted their defense and actually kickstarted their offense a little bit. The Hawks scored 38 points in the second quarter, only 24 points in the third quarter, so the Mavs really needed that. Also had a good game from Jaden Hardy, 21 minutes for him, 13 points, and he closed the game over Max Christie, over Najee Marshall. That was an interesting move by Jason Kidd. Great win for the Mavs, and they keep staying in ninth right now because the Kings are really bad right now.
The Kings are really bad right now. We're going to hear from Locked On Kings host Matt George about that a little bit later on. But a big win for the Mavericks, keeping their NBA play-in hopes alive. Again, the monster night from Anthony Davis. And the end of this game was just a fun kind of back-and-forth battle between these two teams, David. Klay Thompson hit a huge three-pointer to tie things up at 118 all, kind of coming off a little Anthony Davis DHO. And then the final, I guess, Hawks' final attempt of their, where they tried to come back down and get the lead. Caleb Martin was pressuring Trae Young defensively, did a great job on him, forced him into a tough drive, where then Anthony Davis gets a game-saving block on Trae Young's drive. They recover, they get the ball back because it's off the Mavs. Dyson Daniels has the ball under the rim and then somehow manages to bounce it off of Anthony Davis's backside. So I guess you give Anthony Davis's butt, credit for a deflection here in this game as well. Led to the Mavericks getting the ball on the other end, and then you get the Anthony Davis game winner in this one. Honestly, look, the Mavs season felt pretty cooked after the Luka trade, and honestly, there's no fixing that whole situation. But I think the fact that AD wanted to come back and is playing his ass off right now to try and bring the Mavericks to the play-in tournament and trying to play some winning basketball and kind of trying to inspire these Mavericks fans, I think it speaks volumes about kind of maybe where this team is headed. Not right now, obviously this season, but maybe what this team could look like next year once they're actually healthy.
Yeah, I suppose that's a fair assessment. The trade was made thinking down the line and knowing that AD could still bring some value this season, but this season doesn't feel like it matters as much. It's all about whether or not they can keep these players healthy, whether or not they can continue to build off this as their young players continue to develop alongside Kyrie Irving and AD, of course. But, something Nick said that really stands out to me in terms of the Mavericks and their play-in hopes and everything else like that. This season goes where AD goes, basically. I don't know. I have a hard time putting a lot of faith in AD continuing to stay healthy. And that's always been such a hallmark of his career. And it's such a concern because obviously he's missed a lot of time, even since being acquired. There were injury concerns when the trade happened. Can he stay healthy? Can they continue to win? Like, he was a little bit off, obviously, in that Nets loss that Nick referred to. I don't know. It just seems like as good as he was tonight, there's always the potential for him to be not good. And this team needs him to be very good because they just don't have the talent because of injury and everything else like that. So you're looking at this Mavs team. I still don't know if I have faith in them being able to continue to be in the play-in tournament, unless, of course, the Sacramento Kings continue to be as bad as they've been.
Well, they're a game and a half up on the Kings right now, and the Memphis Grizzlies are in absolute free fall, although the Mavs are not going to eclipse the Grizzlies by any stretch of the imagination, but it looks like Mavs are probably going to hold on to that 9th spot in the Western Conference unless something drastic happens with the Kings and or the Suns here to round out the rest of the regular season. But let's get it to our next game of the night, where the Cleveland Cavaliers just keep finding a way to win games even when it doesn't look great in the beginning, and the Knicks struggling to beat any of the elite teams in the NBA. Let's go out to Locked On Knicks for more.
Knicks continue to struggle against the best teams in the Eastern Conference as they fall 124-105 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. What's up, guys? I'm Gavin Shaw with the Locked On Knicks podcast. This is one of those games where you could either be glass half full or glass half empty. You want to be positive, you would say the Knicks were missing their top 3 point guards, including, of course, MVP candidate Jalen Brunson. They were out without Mitchell Robinson, who has helped transform their defense since returning after the All-Star break. They got another exceptional, at least half, from OG Anunoby as he had his 8th straight game with at least 23 points. They were up by Cleveland mainly because of Anunoby's hot shooting by 15 points in the first half. But from that point on, it was 58-43. They are outscored by 36 points the rest of the way. The second half looked like how all these games seem to go when they play the Cavs, the Thunder, or the Boston Celtics, where Cleveland just ramped up the intensity defensively. The Knicks did not really have much of an answer for it. Another relative no-show from Mikal Bridges, significant issues for Karl Anthony Towns on the defensive end, and the question kind of lingers whether the Knicks have it in there to beat these great teams. We'll find out in the playoffs, hopefully, if they get there.
Okay, so to Gavin's point, right? Look, the Knicks are now 0-8 against Cleveland, Boston, and OKC combined. Winless against the 3 best teams in the NBA. To add to that, to add salt to the wound, they're also 0-6 against a combination of the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. So all the California Kings are all the California teams not named the Kings. David, how concerning should this be for the Knicks that they're seemingly unable, and yes, there's injuries and stuff like that to consider, different variables, but how concerned should Knicks fans be that they have been unable to scrap together even one win against the NBA's elite?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put the level of concern at around a 3. And I think you cannot take what teams do in the regular season all that seriously, because as you said, the playoffs are a completely different animal. It's not just the injuries and everything else. It's about schemes. It's about up game to game changes or tweaking certain lineups and things of that sort. And without Jalen Brunson, that team is just so incomplete. You talked about, Gavin mentioned the fact that New York was in a very good place in the first half due to Anunoby shooting, and Karl Anthony Towns was fine. But this has been the recipe for this team all season long, is they kind of just keep things close and then let Jalen Brunson take over as he has, because he's been such a great clutch player. Without Brunson, they just don't have that spark. So with him in the lineup, assuming he comes back, assuming he's healthy, I still like their chances. Although, they're the best teams in the league for a reason. You don't expect anybody to be able to compete with them. So there's some level of concern. I just can't point to that and say I can't dismiss the Knicks outright, despite whatever they've accomplished in the regular season.
That's a fair assessment. We'll see what it ultimately looks like in the postseason if and when the Knicks ultimately match up with one of the Cavs or the Celtics. I guess it might not matter against that West Coast elite unless they make it to the finals, which at that point, that's probably a pretty successful season if you're the Knicks. So coming up, the Heat get a big win against the Celtics and keep their win streak going strong, and the Rockets hit 50 wins, clinching a playoff spot for the first time in 5 years. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is here and in full swing, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Look, I've got my eye on the UH Cougs. I'm Houston born and bred. I went to the University of Houston. It's going to be U of H versus Duke, and I'm pulling for the Cougs all the way. But you can root for and put bets on your alma mater, wherever you went to college, whoever your favorite team is. Go check them out and support them over at FanDuel.com. The FanDuel app is so simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. There's tournament games happening every single day, so visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA Game Night, where we appreciate you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Heat with David Ramil, or come check me out over at Locked On Rockets. Those are the two teams we're going to be talking about here in this segment. We're going to start off with the Heat first, David, where they got a big win against the Boston Celtics. Let's go out to Locked On Celtics for their side of things first here.
Celtics fall flat after coming back from a long road trip. It was a perfect 6-0 trip. Celtics are great in March, but they start April with a loss to Miami. They just didn't look great for most of this game. They made a game of it in the third quarter, and halfway through the fourth, it looked like they might have had a chance there, but Miami ripped off an 11-1 run, and that was that. Celtics just couldn't shoot great. They got nothing from Jason Tatum, really. They were without Porzingis, no Al Horford, no Drew Holiday. So this was already a shorthanded night. Jaylen Brown played well, but I still don't like the way his knee looks. But he still dropped 24 points and shot 50%. Luke Cornett played well. But Miami is on a roll, and they got big games from Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson's best game of the season. Pell Larson continues to play well for Miami. And it's just one of those things. Miami came in here. They wanted this game. They wanted to continue this streak. And the Celtics, first game back from a long road trip, just did not have it. We'll try to bounce back against the Wizards.
All right, David. So after the pretty extensive losing streak that Miami was on there for a minute, now they're riding a 6-game win streak, and they just got this big win against the Celtics. What's been the biggest thing here? How have they kind of turned things around here in this recent stretch of basketball?
They've played some easy teams. They played Charlotte. They played Washington. That was part of it. But they also had a nice big win against the Golden State Warriors. A lot of emotions there with Jimmy Butler's return to Miami. But this was the signature win of the streak so far, is being able to go to Boston. And despite how dismissive John was of Miami's run, I still think that it was an impressive showing. Like, Boston certainly came out flat. You can attest that to maybe the travel or the fact that it's a kind of a trap game after a long road trip. Those typically tend to be very difficult for the team returning home because you're catching up with bills, you're checking with family, you're returning home, but it's not quite the comforts of home immediately. So I understand all that. And they were missing some key players. But at the same time, Miami was missing a couple starters in Duncan Robinson and Andrew Wiggins. The difference to me, their defense has been exceptional. Their three-point shooting has been phenomenal. Tyler Hero has added some incredible versatility to his game, and you saw that tonight. It's not just the three-point shooting anymore as it was earlier in the season. It's the mid-range game. It's his ability to draw fouls at a superstar level. He was 9 of 10 from the free throw line tonight. Really, really solid outing for him. But Pelle Larsson, the rookie, second-round draft pick, nobody expected him to make this kind of contribution, but he's provided a real spark with Wiggins out of the lineup, and he's just provided some tough defense, some tenacity, some great clutch shooting as well. He's just got a little bit of energy, and Spo has done a fantastic job of managing his rotation, tightening it up as the postseason nears, and that's what's led to the 6-game win streak. We'll see if they can keep it going. They've got a back-to-back tomorrow night against the Memphis Grizzlies. That should be a true challenge.
And well, with the Grizzlies in free fall, maybe not so much a challenge, but I will say Miami's one loss back from the Hawks and the Magic now kind of in that Eastern Conference play-in tournament hunt. They would need some things to break their way, but I mean, David, if they keep up the winning and if the Magic and Hawks do them a couple favors, lose a couple extra games between now and the end of the season, we could be headed for a scenario where the Heat are at the top of the play-in tournament bracket. You win the one game, you earn the 7th seed, and then we're looking at yet another matchup between the Heat and the Celtics in the playoffs. And I mean, how would you feel at that point? This iteration of the Heat, this iteration of the Celtics, do you think there's maybe not a true upset there, but how do you feel about Heat Celtics potentially in the first
I
round.
like the rivalry, obviously, and at the same time, I don't think Miami has much of a chance because by that point, you expect Boston to be fairly healthy unless Brown's knee continues to be a lingering issue. But with their three-point shooting, their home court advantage, and all the intangibles, the fact that they're playing for something which is a second consecutive championship means much more than it does in an early April game. So I think it'll be competitive just based on Miami playing at such a high level right now. They do have some true depth, but I don't really give them much of a chance at all to even pull off anything close to the upset. Maybe it might go 6 games at best.
Let's get out to our next game where the Houston Rockets just mollywop the Utah Jazz. Sorry to our fearless leader, David Locke. But Rockets get the 143-105 win against the Jazz. They earn their 50th win of the season. The Lakers kind of rained on that parade the other night. They had to delay earning their 50th win of the season, but this is the first time the Rockets have eclipsed 50 wins since all the way back in the 2018-2019 season, and it's their first time that they've clinched a playoff spot in 5 years since the James Harden era. And I just want to take a moment the game is the game. It's the Jazz. They're tanking. They're pretty bad. And the Rockets just handled business against a bad team. They had a bunch of different guys scoring double figures. Reed Shepherd off the Rockets bench in garbage time had 15 points in 9 minutes in the fourth quarter. That just kind of tells you kind of how this game went at the end of things. Starters took care of business. It was a complete blowout for much of the night. But I just want to take a moment to highlight here that the Rockets organization took a risk, right? In when they traded James Harden, they elected to bottom out and truly say, you know what, we're hitting reset, we're tanking, and we're going to tank effectively. And sometimes we see teams choose to bottom out or stars force their way out, and teams enter this kind of, they enter NBA purgatory, right? They kind of enter this cycle of maybe they're like pseudo competitive or they're vying for a play-in spot and they're kind of middling around. The Rockets didn't do that. They said, you know what? We're just going to commit to being the worst possible team we can be for a handful of years, accrue all the top draft assets. Then they went out, they hired a top-tier head coach in Ime Udoka. They brought in the veterans last year, and people still ridiculed them for this. People ridiculed the Rockets for the signings of Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and said that they overpaid and that they were going to be a bad team and they were just bringing in these guys to scrape together a few wins. It really wasn't that. They brought them in to establish a culture, to teach these young guys how to win games. And now we're kind of seeing the fruits of that labor really pay off. This Rockets team this year, David, to me feels like the Thunder of last year. I don't know any other way that you can't look at it as the same. The one glaring difference between this Rockets team this year and the Thunder of last year is the Thunder still had SGA and the Rockets still kind of had that big question mark of who is ultimately going to be their go-to guy. But so many of their players on their team are so incredibly young. Şengün is still young. Jalen is still young. Amin Thompson's only in year 2. And all of these guys still have a little bit more time to grow into these roles, and maybe one of them does blossom into that best player on a true contending team. What are your thoughts on the Rockets so far this season, kind of what they've achieved at this point?
It's incredible. It's a hell of a turnaround. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that these additions make a lot of sense. Like I wasn't one of the ones that were critical of it. It did seem maybe like a slight overpay in some regards, but in terms of the intangibles and creating a belief system, an internal belief system, like you could see this team 8-2 over the last 10 games. There is belief there. They have that faith in what they're capable of. So I think it's been phenomenal. I think it's a really good, fast team, a really interesting team. You had concerns about what they're capable of in the playoffs. Have some of those been allayed a little bit, seeing how this team has performed over the last few weeks? And I think they're at least capable of winning the first round against one of those play-in teams, whoever they might match up against. But do you think they can go deeper on one of those runs? You compared them to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Are they capable of a run to the Western Conference Finals?
I'll be honest, they're probably not going to be favored against anybody that they match up with in the first round unless by some chance they draw the Grizzlies, because every other team has playoff experience. Every other team has an established star or multiple established stars on their roster, and that's going to be the shortcoming for this Rockets team. That said, I like their chances against any team in a true 7-game series. The defense is going to translate to the postseason, and that's an identity that this team has built up all season long. We're going to see what happens with the half-court offense, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, this Rockets team, they're not done yet. They're trying to secure that 2 seed in the West, and it maybe looks like the Denver Nuggets are kind of punting on chasing that 2 seed. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. I will say that as it currently stands, it's a bit of a shame that Ime Udoka any other year would be like a shoe-in for Coach of the Year with the Rockets and their win improvement from last year to this year and being the second best team for most of the season in a stacked Western Conference. But Kenny Atkinson has the thing in the bag with the Cavaliers. So at this point, Ime Udoka is going to have to settle for a runner-up award.
To be honest with you.
Well, you know what? I guess I don't know. That's got to be the top three for sure. But I kind of figured that Kenny Atkinson was going to win this thing in a landslide. Like, I think those will be your finalists. It'll be Atkinson wins it, and it'll be Udoka and Bickerstaff as your 2 and 3 in some order, and that'll be your top 3 finalists. So Jamal Mosley was in the running earlier, and then the Magic just kind of cratered this season. But coming up, let's take a look at the Sacramento Kings. How cooked are the Kings after a bad loss to the Wizards? And are the Nuggets not worried about their playoff seeding punting on their game against the San Antonio Spurs? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Look, daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through your day. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of pickup after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Look, I've been staying up late catching some of these March Madness games, and it's definitely taken its toll on me. That's where 5 Hour Energy helps me keep up the very next day. Head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. Spoiler, the watermelon is the best flavor. It's my favorite one. It's awesome. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your doorstep. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night, where in our final segment, David and I play shoot, drive, or pass for our final 5 games of our 9-game slate. Shoot if you have a take about a game, drive if you want to lob up a question about a game, or pass if there's not really much else to add to whatever our local expert had to share. And where we're going to go first is out in DC, where the Kings suffered a bad loss at the hands of the Wizards, and we've got Matt George of Locked On Kings has thoughts on this game.
If this regular season is real life NBA 2K, then I need God to simulate until the end of this Kings season. 6 games remaining after the Sacramento Kings just lost to the now 17-59 Washington Wizards, one of the worst teams in the league by a long shot. The Kings just lost to while they're in the midst of a heated play-in race in the Western Conference. They're hanging on to the 10th seed by a thread, by the grace of the Phoenix Suns being even more of an embarrassment than the Sacramento Kings are at this point. That's the only reason they're in this position. And while the organization cares so much about this team making it to the playoffs to try and salvage whatever the hell this season is, the players themselves don't seem to care. This is the group that the Sacramento Kings chose over their only head coach that's been successful that they had in 20 years in Mike Brown, and the only star that they've drafted who made it to a second contract since DeMarcus Cousins in 2010. This is the direction the Sacramento Kings chose for themselves. They've made their bed, now they have to lay in it, and it's infested with bed bugs, it's hot, the pillows are uncomfortable, and the blankets are raggedy pieces of cloth. This is what the Sacramento Kings have done to themselves. They can only blame themselves, and God, can we fast forward to this offseason so some freaking changes can finally be made.
I will always live for a Matt George crash out as it relates to the Sacramento Kings. Tell us how you really feel, Matt. My goodness, that is some pent-up frustration about the Kings. And I'll be honest, I mean, look, things do not look great for the Sacramento Kings, a.k.a. the Chicago Bulls 2.0, with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan running the show over there. It's not a great setup. Rough all-around game. They allowed 6 different Wizards to score in double figures in this one. Defense looked non-existent at times. Just rough across the board. Shoot, drive, pass. What you got for me on this one?
I guess I'll shoot, although it's tough to follow that act up from Matt. I don't know how much more I could add, but I just have to, I agree with him 100%. This team does not look like they're committed to winning. They look like they're just kind of coasting at this point, unsure of what's next. They don't have that star player. As good as Sabonis is, he's not the top of the pyramid in terms of what a hierarchy for a team is. And he struggled of late, but although his playmaking was pretty solid tonight. But you just look at that team, they don't have the shooting. They don't have their depth. They only went 9 of 25 off their bench, and that includes 5 of 6 from Jonas Valanciunas. So you take him out of the equation, and everybody else was miserable. Malik Monk was shot really badly. They're just not getting much production from anybody across the board. This team just looks like they're ready to pack it in after their one game in the play-in and probably call it a season at that point. So I don't know. I just don't expect much from the Kings. I don't think anybody else should either.
I don't even know where they go from here at this point. Like, what do you do? Do you trade Sabonis and try to bottom out again? Do you I don't even know what their pick situation is, but look, prayers up for Matt, honestly. At this point, prayers up for the Kings and prayers up for Matt. Let's go to our next game here where the San Antonio Spurs get a 113-106 win against the Denver Nuggets in a game where, look, understandably, the Denver Nuggets coming off the second night of a back-to-back in what was easily one of, if not probably the best game of the year, going double OT against the Minnesota Timberwolves. An absolutely insane performance with Jokic with his 61-point triple-double and just the back and forth in that game. So Nuggets elect to rest basically their entire starting lineup in this one. I don't know about you, David, but I kind of want to shoot here. Do you look at this game and think that the Nuggets are not concerned with where they land seeding wise, because things are they're still in a dead race in the Western Conference for where they're ultimately going to land? Do you think that this signals, hey, okay, or do you think they maybe thought, you know what, our reserves, they can take care of business against the Spurs as a bad team? Do you think they were content to maybe lose this game, or do you think they had it in the bag even without their starters?
No, I don't think they had it in the bag. I think this is Michael Malone smartly playing some of those backups and giving them an opportunity to get a little bit of experience, because who knows which one of them might have to step up in a play-in tournament or a playoff tournament, excuse me. So you're going to need them to find a way to contribute, or at least be like they feel like they have some kind of ownership and have a role to play on this team. I think that's a smart decision. I think you can't afford to punt, because we've seen what this team is capable of. They're champions. They have Nikola Jokic, still the best or one of the best players in the NBA, and he's a singular difference maker of himself. And I think once you have him on the roster, you're fine. Like, it doesn't matter where you wind up in the final seedings, at least from my perspective. They're going to get home court advantage. They're going to be fine. Who knows who they'll go up against in the second or later rounds. But at the same time, I think they're going to be able to contend against anybody as long as Jokic is on the table. So I think once he's still there, they should be fine. This is not that big a deal. I'm not reading too much into this loss.
If they end up on the OKC side of the bracket and get eliminated by OKC, I think we're going to come back and look at this game as potentially a big deal, depending on where they land in the standings. If they're like a half game off of being in the 2-3 bracket instead of the 4-5 bracket, but we'll see how it plays out. Let's go to our next game, where the Hornets made it out to Indiana to face the Pacers. Let's go out to Locked On Pacers for more.
Pacers win right here on this court in the Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Tony East here with Locked On Pacers. Honestly, not a ton of good to say about this Pacers performance. It was the Hornets, 119-105. It's about you expect the score to be against a lowly team, but a 1-point game in the third quarter. Pacers were very for a lot of this game, but their focus came when it mattered. They started to generate better shots in the second half, which they were happy with. Tyrese Halliburton was great again with another points, assist, double-double. And Aaron Nesmith, huge, late 11 consecutive points from just him in the fourth quarter. That was enough for the Pacers on offense. Their defense got just enough better late in this game. Miles Turner had some nice plays protecting the rim, as he does. And once all that came together, that was enough for the Pacers to win, get to win number 45 on the season. Still a firm grip on that 4 seed in the East, with Detroit playing in OKC tonight. We'll have much more on Locked On Pacers.
Tyrese Halliburton leading the way for Indiana in this game with 22 points on 9 of 15 shooting to go along with 10 dimes, couple steals, couple blocks in this one. David, what you got, shoot, drive, or pass?
I'm going to pass on this. I think Tony said it best. It wasn't a great game from Indiana, but they did just enough to beat a pretty lowly Hornets group. So you know what? They'll take the win and move on.
Let's go out to our next game, where the OKC Thunder get a win against the surprisingly feisty Pistons, who managed to put up a pretty strong fight despite missing a couple of their big-time contributors.
The Detroit Pistons lose a tough game to the Oklahoma City Thunder, shorthanded on national TV. They didn't have Kay Cunningham in this game. Tobias Harris went out in the middle of this game. Isaiah Stewart out due to suspension. Marcus Sasser out due to suspension, along with Ron Holland. They were shorthanded. They were without more than almost half their rotation in this game. The fact they were able to keep it as close as they did all the way to the end of this game. I know the ending score makes it look like it was a blowout, but this was a 4-point game with around 2 minutes left. And if they don't call a questionable offensive foul on a during putback or a during drop step layup, this is a 2-point game. The Pistons have a chance to kind of steal one at the end here. So give them a lot of credit for just simply being in this game with how shorthanded they are. They do desperately need Cade Cunningham back. But you can be happy with the effort they gave tonight. This was a tough matchup. This is the best team in the league you're going against, and you're shorthanded without your best player. Keeping it this close, moral victory.
Moral victory for the Pistons against the best team in the NBA. David, what you got for me? Shoot, drive, or pass?
Yeah, I guess I'll shoot. My take is it's a shame that on a nationally televised game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, this should have been an instant classic. And being shorthanded as they were, no Cade Cunningham, that a large audience didn't get a chance to really appreciate what Cunningham's been, because he needs these kinds of games to continue to build what has been a phenomenal season for him, because he is a young star on the rise. And I think more people need to see that. I know the people watching and listening to this show probably already are aware of how good Cunningham is, but for that broader audience, especially as we're nearing the postseason, they need to know that these aren't last year's Pistons or the year before that Pistons. This is a really good team, and Cunningham is the head of that particular snake, and he's been very, very good. So I just lament the fact that he wasn't available to play at the OKC Thunder.
The good news is, right, with as good as the Pistons have been this season, right, they should be a shoo-in to earn some more nationally televised games going into next season, right? And that'll be even more of an opportunity for Cade Cunningham and the rest of this really exciting Pistons team to kind of showcase their talent. They're one of the most, this is like, the Pistons are definitely a league pass team. They're like a team, if you haven't watched the Pistons this season, like, try to catch a couple more games before the playoffs start. Pay attention to what they do in the playoffs. We talked about JB Bickerstaff a little bit earlier. He has done a phenomenal job turning around this organization and them taking a really massive step forward this year. And they're going to be competitive for years to come. Cade Cunningham is the heart of that team. He's the engine that runs everything, and he's had a stellar season for them. Shoe in for All NBA. I'm calling it right now. He's All NBA third team, Cade Cunningham. Let's get to our final game of the night, where the Clippers taking care of business against the still injury-riddled New Orleans Pelicans. Let's go out to Locked On Clippers for more.
Clippers get a 114-98 win at the Intuit Dome to begin their 5-game home stand. Got the job done, and it took a 20-plus point performance by James Harden to go along with 10 assists, and Kawhi Leonard looking more like himself with each passing game. Over 20 again for Kawhi. And how about Bogdanovic? Every single game he plays well, it feels like we win. Multiple threes in that fourth quarter to propel us to victory. The Pelicans have been a tough matchup for the Clippers, regardless of who's been in uniform. But tonight, with them very, very injured and basically shutting down their season, we were able to get the job done. Good win for the Clips, 26-11 at home, 4 home games left.
Good win for the Clippers, says Darian Vaziri, host of Locked On Clips. David, shoot, drive, or pass, our final game of the night. What you got?
I'm going to pass, but I will say, however it shakes out, whether Denver somehow leapfrogs the Lakers or whether or not the Clippers leapfrog past the Minnesota Timberwolves, I am hoping for an LA series between the Clippers and the Lakers. I know it's going to be a heavily favored crowd for the Lakers, but I want to see those two LA teams match up, because that would be really interesting. A lot of personalities there, some big names in Kawhi, LeBron, Luka, etc. There's so many different things to look forward to in a series that way. So that's all I want. I know we're still weeks away, but I'm looking forward to that potential matchup.
Man, we're not even weeks away. We're like two weeks away exactly. We're not even
that's
I guess
weeks.
It's still I guess that's still
weeks, Jackson.
All right,
plural.
I'm sorry. It's technically weeks away. Okay, it's the NBA season is winding down. The playoffs are on the horizon, and seeding is going to be imminently figured out. All that good stuff. We appreciate you for being here with us at Locked On NBA Game Night. For your next listen, go find the Locked On Show for your favorite team. Until then, we will catch you guys on our very next game night.